Hi everyone, it's Erin from the Provincial Farmhouse. In today's video, I'm doing some French country thrift flips using some of the brand new IOD. For my first project, I'm going to be working on this lovely pot that I found. I loved the shape, but obviously I wanted to give it a refresh. I'm going to be using IOD's new Veranda Stamp, and this has 2 pages of beautiful designs. You've got this first one here with some ornate oval frames, some beautiful roses, a couple of different sized frames there, and then you have this gorgeous lattice design, and they've done it in 2 different scales, and there are also the masks, and the masks also come stamped with the designs on them, so you're less likely to lose them. When you first get your stamps, it's important to take some 220 grit sandpaper and give them a very light sand. This just helps the ink to stick to the design a little bit better. So you can see I'm just preparing my stamps. I put them aside, and now I'm going to dust some plastic with some cornstarch and also my rolling pin, and I'm going to be using some dust air dry clay. I'm going to grab some out and then start to sort of flatten it out, and then I'm going to be using my rolling pin to roll it out to about 2 mil thick. I don't need the overall shape of it to be perfect. I'm then going to add some glue to the pot, and I realized that I would have to also add a little bit of clay into the lettering there because it is sunken in or engraved, so we want to fill that up so that the rest of the clay sits nicely on the pot. So I'm just smoothing that out, and then I'm going to add some more glue to the surface. I'm using my Sealy's Quickset wood glue. I'm spreading the glue out, and then I'm going to take our clay that we rolled out and I'm going to position it on top of the section that has the glue and gently smooth it down. I tore off the edges of the clay just to make it a little bit easier when I add more clay to blend the separate pieces together. So I'm just going to tear off that excess. I'm going to trim off the excess from the bottom as well, and of course up the top to give it a tidier finish. I then turned the pot over, added some more glue, and I'm going to add some more clay that I have already rolled out. I'm repeating a very similar process here, tearing off the excess, cutting off the excess up the top and down the bottom. I also used a little bit of water on my clay to help blend in any of those areas that meet. Next, I'm going to take this smaller scale lattice design, and I'm actually going to be imprinting that into the clay. So I'm going to position my pot. I've got something either side to hold it in place, and then I'm pressing my stamp down into the clay. You don't want to press too hard, but you definitely need to have some pressure so that the imprint of that stamp goes into the clay. Now this is a rounded surface, and it also obviously gets larger as it gets higher, so I did have to improvise in certain areas to continue that beautiful lattice pattern. So I'm going to continue adding that stamp to the clay, pressing down, and as I said, I'm going to improvise. I had to reposition it a few times. You can see I'm working it out here, but I am also going to have a few areas that are fainter than others so that it looks like this is a bit of an older piece, and it will look like the design has faded and worn away over time. Next, I'm going to take the smaller frame design from that Veranda stamp, and I'm positioning that in the center and pressing down. So this is a section that I haven't finished stamping the lattice stamp on, and I'm just going to smooth out any areas that I'm not happy with, and then I'm going to come in with that lattice stamp again and just work my way around that oval impression there and add that lattice stamp so that it looks like it's just a continuing pattern until that point, if that makes sense. So we're like framing out that design. Once I was finished adding the lattice design, I took the smaller rose design from that Veranda stamp, and I'm going to be positioning that in the center of the frame we've already added. So I'm just pressing down firmly, and then when I'm happy with it, I will pull it away. Next, I'm going to be using IOD's new Conservatory labels design. So this is what we've all been waiting for. We've got some more wonderful labels to work with. This is my favorite one, the Ornate design. You can see I've dusted the mold with cornstarch. I'm pressing the clay in, using my fingers to get a smooth edge, and then I'm popping that casting out. I'm then going to actually cut this design in half. I only want the bottom half of the design. I'm adding some glue to the back of it, and then I am actually going to be positioning that around the base of our pot there. After I've glued the casting down, I'm just using my fingers to push the casting over the lip of the pot, and then I did end up adding another 2 of the designs there, the half of the label from the Conservatory design. And again, I'm just using my fingers to smooth it out. Water also helped here. I would spritz a little bit here and there to help the clay just be manipulated a little bit easier. I let my clay dry overnight, and the next day I came in with Paint Couture's Buttercream chalk paint, and I'm going to give my pot 2 coats of this lovely cream tone, and you'll see that I'm painting the entire outside, the top lip of the pot, and also just the inside section where it's more of that tan color, because inside further down the pot it's already a lovely cream. Just a reminder that if you're in Australia, you can now grab these new IOD products on my website, theprovincialfarmhouse.com.au. Once my 2 coats of buttercream were dry, I took that same roses stamp that we used in the center of the frame design there. I've inked it up with IOD black ink, and now I'm pressing it down in the exact same place that we've already made the impression, and then I'm lifting the design up. I'm also then going to take the oval frame design that we used and do the exact same thing. I'm just pressing that inked up stamp into the same impression that we've already made, and then pulling the design up. When that was dry, I took Paint Couture's light brown sugar glaze, and I'm going to be adding it to the entire pot and really working it into the beautiful details of that Conservatory label that we added at the bottom, and obviously all of the impressions that we have made with the Veranda Stamp. So you can see I've added it. Now I'm wiping it back with a wet wipe, and obviously it will be up to you how much you wipe back, or you could even leave this step out if this is a little bit too grungy for you. But I'm going to continue to add that glaze around the entire outside of the pot, and of course the top lip and the inside as well. Once I was happy with the glaze, I did take a fresh wet wipe and I wiped back a little bit more of that glaze from our rose design in the center just to brighten that up a little bit. When the glaze was dry, I took Paint Couture's Verda Green glaze, and I'm just going to be adding it in random spots to simulate the look of moss. So you can see I've dabbed it on, and now I am dabbing it off with a wet wipe. And in doing this, you're going to get varying tones of that lovely green, and it does look quite realistic and a lot like moss has grown over this old vintage pot. So I'm going to continue adding it in random places. And here's our finished French country pot. I love how this turned out. It was so fun to use IOD's new Veranda stamp, and I can see it being used in so many more of my projects in the future. Let me know what you think of this in the comments. For my next project, I'm going to be working on this frame that I had in my stash. I've removed the glass. I'm going to be using the backing that comes with it, but I'm going to be using the side that doesn't have the design on it. And obviously I will add some brown paper to the back to tidy it up later. To give this frame more of an ornate look, I'm using IOD's Trimmings 3 mold. I'm dusting the larger design with some cornstarch, and then I'm rolling out some of my dust air dry clay. I'm going to start working the clay into the design and then use my fingers to push out the excess. I did have to do this quite a few times, but it was definitely worth it. Once I'm happy with the clay in there, I flexed it, flipped it over, and I'm going to start pulling the mold back. And as you you can see, the castings are so beautiful from this mold. So I'm going to be positioning that around the frame, and obviously these are interconnecting designs. And then I took the Conservatory labels again, and I'm going to cast that same ornate design that we used in the first project, but I am going to be leaving it intact this time, and that is going to sit down the bottom in the center. So I'm going to continue creating those molds from the Trimmings 3 design and adding those until I am happy with how it looks. I let my castings dry overnight, and the next day when I came back I did have just a little bit of shrinkage, so I just took a little bit more of my clay and worked it into any gaps, but honestly there weren't very many that I had to fix. I'm then going to take Paint Couture's pitch black chalk paint, and I'm going to be applying one even coat over the entire frame. One coat is all that it took, as this is very highly pigmented, and you'll see I'm really working that paint into all of the details of our castings. And I'm also going around in a dabbing and stippling motion because this is going to help create texture and make it look like this frame is old and vintage. So I'm going to continue working my way around that frame, adding that beautiful black paint. And this is ultimately going to be a really great base for our next step, because I am going to be coming in with a metallic, and darker colors always sit a lot better under those richer tones like gold, and we are actually going to be using bronze, so it's going to be perfect. So again, I'm just going around doing some more dabbing and stippling before the paint's dry, making sure that I'm happy with that texture, and then I let it dry completely. Next, I'm going to take Paint Couture's Bronze Luxe Metallic, and I'm going to be applying it over the top of our dry pitch black paint. You'll see sometimes I'm brushing it on, in other times I'm dabbing and stippling, and I'm going to continue adding this beautiful paint around the entire frame, and it only took one coat to get the coverage that I wanted. Now, I don't mind if I do have a few areas where that black is showing through, because it's just going to give this frame more of a vintage feel, which is exactly what we're after. Also important to note that when you are using the Luxe Metallics, that obviously as they dry, they do become more vibrant. If I inspire you to try any of these Paint Couture products, I would really appreciate it if you would use my affiliate link. I will pop it in the description and on the screen. I just get a little thank you from Paint Couture in return. I set this off to the side to dry, and I'm then taking my Paint Couture Buttercream chalk paint, and I'm painting over the top of the wooden board that is going to sit in the center. So I'm going to give this 2 coats of this lovely creamy tone. It doesn't matter if I don't have perfect coverage here, because we are going to be putting a transfer over the top. Next, I'm going to be using IOD's new transfer, Joie de Roses, and this has 8 gorgeous pages of vintage looking florals. It also has some mandarins and a couple of birds and butterflies. It's also designed to look vintage and cracked. You can actually see some cracks in some of the designs. So I'm going to pull out 2 of the pages that has the little emblem down the bottom. I thought this would make a beautiful artwork. So you can see I'm just working out how much I'm going to need, creasing with my fingers and then cutting. The grid lines are definitely very helpful here. And of course, I will also be trimming off the excess for the other side as well. Next, I'm going to use a tape measure to work out the center of my piece so that I can be sure to line up that emblem design down the bottom at the center. So I'm just putting some lead pencil lines down, and then I'm going to peel off the left design first, peel that backing off, line it up with my center lines that I've made, and then press down. I'm then going to use the plastic transfer tool that comes in the pack to go over the top of the entire design first. I always go over the whole thing first to make sure it's all stuck down. And then I pick a corner and I lift it and I do my burnishing as I go, just making sure that that design has released before I pull that plastic any further. And then once it's all down, I do use that same transfer sheet to do a bit more burnishing. Next, I'm going to line up the right-hand side design. You can see I'm just making sure that the two designs meet, and then I'm pressing down. They've actually created a wavy line where it meets, and I feel like this really complements the cracks that are already in the design, and it tends to make the two images blend together quite nicely. You can still see the transition, but it definitely looks like it's part of that aged crackle finish. Next, I'm going to take the two other pages of the transfer that I need to complete my design on the left. I'm only going to have to cut about 3 centimeters of each design, and then I'm lining that up and just repeating that same process, burnishing down my transfer, and I will repeat the same process for the other side. So I still have a lot of design left to work with here, and these would be beautiful doing some layering on. There's just so many possibilities with this gorgeous new transfer design. To seal my transfer, I'm going to use Paint Couture's Extreme Guard in satin, and I'm going to apply 2 even coats. When that was dry, I took Paint Couture's Light Brown Sugar Glaze, and I'm going to go over the top of the entire design. This already has a very vintage feel with all those cracks and faded colors, but I'm going to add a little bit more because obviously that background looks a little bit stark compared to it. So this glaze is going to give it more of an aged finish. So I'm just going to apply it to the whole thing, and then I'm going to take a wet wipe, and you can see I'm dabbing it off. I'm not wiping, I'm dabbing it. And because I'm using a wet wipe, I'm going to get some little water bubbles as well, but these will look a little bit like age spots. So I'm just going to continue to do this over the entire piece until I'm happy with how it all looks. When that was dry, I put the artwork back into the frame, and then once this was done, I did take some brown paper and put it over the entire back. And here's our finished French country artwork. I am so happy with how this turned out. That transfer is absolutely stunning, definitely a new favorite, and that Conservatory label goes beautifully with the Trimmings 3 mold. Let me know what you think of this in the comments. For my final project today, I'm going to be giving this plastic tray a makeover. To prime my surface, I'm going to use Paint Couture's 2-in-1 primer in grey. This also comes in white. This is just the color that I have open. I'm going to do 1 coat, let it dry for about an hour, and then I will do a second coat and let that dry for a few hours. I'm then going to use Paint Couture's Buttercream chalk paint, and I'm going to be applying 3 coats of this lovely creamy tone over the top of my primer. When my paint was dry, I took out IOD's new Pastiche Stamp. This has 2 pages. We have some gorgeous bird cages, some cloches, we've got a nest, some florals, some butterflies, some eggs. We even have some books. There is so much to choose from. And I'm also going to be using IOD's new Lover of Flowers transfer. This is actually from a vintage book, I believe, and it's got some lovely poems about different flowers and so many florals to choose from. I am going to be selecting one of those to go on the tray as well. So I selected the Forget-Me-Not design, and I want to put a bird cage underneath the flowers, but almost like it's sitting in amongst the flowers. So I'm going to trim out what I want first, and then I'm going to start to work out how I'm going to be positioning my design. I'm then going to take this smaller bird cage from the Pastiche Stamp, and I'm going to ink it up with IOD's permanent black ink. I'm then going to position that beautiful birdcage stamp in the center of my tray and then press down. I'm then going to be trimming off some more of the florals from our lovely Lover of Flowers transfer. Again, I'm just working out how much of this transfer I'm going to be using. I then positioned it in place and used my fingernails to crease a line, and then I'm going to use my scissors to trim that off as well. And whatever I cut off, I will put to one side, and I can use that in a future project. I'm then going to peel the backing off and then position that transfer down, and then use the transfer tool to rub and burnish that design. So you can see I'm going over the entire thing, and then I'm going to pick a corner and start lifting that plastic up. Next, I'm going to work out the positioning of the text that goes with this design. I'm just using a pen to roughly trace out how I'm going to cut it. I can actually see the bird cage underneath the transfer, and then I'm going to trim it out. I did end up doing a little bit more of adjustment, cutting out a few more words to have on the left just to balance out the two sides. So you can see there, I'm just working out how it's going to look, and then when I'm happy with it, I'll peel off the backing and start transferring that design down. It was a little bit fiddly, so make sure you take your time with this. The text is quite small, so you definitely want to go a little bit slower here as you're lifting that plastic up and away. To seal my transfers, I'm going to be using Paint Couture's Extreme Guard in Satin. I'm just going to apply 2 coats here and then let them dry. Next, I want to bring in some color, so I'm going to take Paint Couture's Abundance Mineral Paint, and I'm going to be adding that lovely blue tone just to the outside border of the tray. I felt like the tone of this blue went well with the Forget-Me-Nots from the Lover of Flowers transfer, so I felt like it tied in pretty well. I'm going to do 2 coats of this, and this already has a built-in sealer, so I won't need to add any more top coat. Next, I'm going to be applying Paint Couture's Crackle Step 1 just to the center of the tray. I really love a vintage look, so this is definitely going to help with that. I'm going to paint it on, let it dry for about 30 minutes. When it's ready, it will feel sticky and tacky to the touch, and then I will come in with Paint Couture's Crackle Step 2 and repeat the same process, just adding it to the center design, and then I will let this dry for about an hour. Before I went any further, I also decided to do a little bit of light distressing around the edges to bring back some of that buttercream underneath the Abundance to try and blend the 2 sections together, and again, of course, add a little bit of weathering and age. I then used Paint Couture's Light Brown Sugar, and I'm going to be applying that over the top of the entire tray. Again, this is going to give us that wonderfully aged look, and it is obviously going to highlight the lovely crackle that we added to the center. So I'm applying it, and then I'm going to be using a wet wipe to pull a lot of that back. I do, however, want the glaze to accumulate in a lot of the cracks and crevices. And here's our finished tray. I think this turned out really sweet. It was so much fun to be able to have a play with the new Pastiche Stamp and of course the Lover of Flowers transfer. I really hope that you've enjoyed today's video and that you're as excited as I am about IOD's new release. Let me know if you had a favorite project from today. If you enjoyed today's video, I would really appreciate it if you would hit that like button, comment, and share it out. If you haven't already, I would love it if you would hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so that you don't miss out on any of our videos. You can find the products used today, including the beautiful new IOD items, on our website, theprovincialfarmhouse.com.au. Thanks for watching.